In today's video, we have some updated NHL trade rumors concerning the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Dallas Stars, and the Washington Capitals. Plus, I want to discuss the Edmonton Oilers and the players they had on waivers yesterday, as well as the new contract for Mikko Koskinen. Plus, we had a small trade between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Minnesota Wild. We'll get into all that coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. As I mentioned off the top, we have a lot of things to cover today, so let's jump right into it here. First up, let's get into the small trade that we had between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Minnesota Wild. So nothing too significant here, but the Vegas Golden Knights have traded defenseman Brad Hunt along with a 7th round pick over to the Minnesota Wild in exchange for a conditional 5th round pick. Now that condition is basically between the Minnesota Wild's 5th round pick that they hold, as well as the Washington Capitals 5th round pick, which they previously acquired. Whichever one is the better of the two will be the one that gets traded over to the Vegas Golden Knights. Brad Hunt's certainly been a very serviceable defenseman for the Vegas Golden Knights. Between last year and this year, he played in 58 games and put up 25 points. I mean, I thought it was really decent. Certainly a better option most nights than, say, John Merrill, who I haven't been overly impressed with since he's gone to Vegas. But he's off to Minnesota now. Obviously, the Vegas Golden Knights trying to make room on their roster. They did have a lot of defensemen on their NHL contract. So I know this is a minor deal, but in a way, I kind of would like to have seen Brad Hunt stay with Vegas. I thought he was pretty good there, but he'll get an opportunity to play in Minnesota. He does have some connections there to general manager Paul Fenton, as he was previously in the Nashville organization, where Fenton used to be the assistant GM. Plus, I also found out that his spouse is from Minnesota as well, so certainly a lot of family connections and familiarity there with Paul Fenton as well. So certainly a pretty good fit there for Brad Hunt. So he's off to the Minnesota Wild. Now, jumping over to the Edmonton Oilers here quickly, as we know and discussed here yesterday, they have a couple of forwards on waivers in Ty Rattie and Ryan Spooner. Now, we did find out after noon Eastern time today that both forwards have cleared waivers. Now, as of right now, neither forward I can see has been demoted to the minors. In fact, Ryan Spooner will be in the lineup tonight when they play the Detroit Red Wings. So sometimes, as we know, just because a player goes through waivers, it doesn't automatically mean they're going to be demoted if they're not claimed, like we saw with Zach Smith, for example, earlier with Ottawa. Sometimes it's just there's something that the team uses as a bit of a wake-up call to try to get things really rejuvenated and get things going for the player. So Spooner's in the lineup tonight. Ty Rattie could go to the minors. That hasn't really been made clear as of yet. He certainly is a scratch for tonight. I haven't seen anything further from the Oilers indicating if they're sending him down or not. But Ken Hitchcock basically said that both players are, going to be given further opportunities as long as they're with the club, and they want guys who can produce, and if they're playing well and producing, they'll stay in the lineup. Now, as well, Ty Rattie played for Ken Hitchcock in the past because he came over from the St. Louis organization where Hitchcock previously coached. And Hitchcock obviously didn't seem to be a big fan of him over there as well. So can't help but wonder if, he's in Ken Hitchcock's doghouse, that maybe this Hitchcock just doesn't really like the way he plays or something. But obviously he hasn't been producing after, a really solid ending to last year and a pretty hot preseason. But that is certainly tough to sustain, for a player who's not really proven on a longer stretch of games. So we'll see what's going on here. But right now, both those guys from the Oilers have cleared and remain with the club. And of course, they also announced later yesterday, after yesterday's video was published, that they've signed goaltender Mikko Koskinen to a 3-year contract extension. So that pretty much all but confirms that Cam Talbot will be out with the Edmonton Oilers, if not by the trade deadline, and certainly this summer. He is a pending UFA. Mikko Koskinen's contract over the next 3 years has an annual cap hit of $4.5 million. Plus, he's also given a partial no-trade clause with a 15-team no-trade list. So that's certainly, a pretty hefty contract and a big commitment from the Oilers for a guy who's only been with the club for, half a season and played a limited amount of NHL games, in my opinion. Like, for example, if we want to compare this to another reasonable contract, and I'm going to put this up on the screen here, Pittsburgh Penguins have recently signed goaltender Casey DeSmith to a 3-year extension as well. Now, on the graphic on the screen, you're going to see both contracts for each player here. DeSmith was signed for 3 years at $1.25 million, where Koskinen gets $4.5 million. It's quite a drastic difference. Casey DeSmith is younger at age 27, where Koskinen's 30. And you can certainly see as well that Casey DeSmith has played a bit more games and has better statistics. Now, I do understand the fact that Koskinen is expected to be the starter, so he'll play more. So, starting goalies usually do get played more than backups, whereas DeSmith, I guess at this point he's still considered a backup, even though there have been times this year where he's played better than Matt Murray. But really, when you take a look at the two deals, I do think that Mikko Koskinen certainly got himself quite a contract here, and I just hope for the Oilers' sake that it's not another contract that they end up regretting here in a year or two's time. Not to take anything away from Koskinen, he's certainly been the better of the two Oilers goalies this year, certainly outplayed Cam Talbot. Does seem to be quite a competitor and had his moments where he's looked really solid. Just a really small sample size. And, the Oilers have enough contracts on their books right now that just aren't favorable, like Russell, Lucic, etc. They really don't need another one. And this also ties up a lot of cap space for next year. Already, they only have 16 players under contract, and they don't have a whole lot of cap space to finish filling out their roster. They're going to have some other guys like Alex Chiasson is going to be looking for a decent raise as well. So they certainly have a lot of tough decisions to make. They would be nice for them to be able to shed some other contracts that aren't favorable. Of course, that's not easy to do. So we'll see where the Oilers go from here. I just hope that Mikko Koskinen doesn't become Mikko Kosk too much here down the road. Just like I said, he's a good goalie. Still small sample size, relatively unproven. He did get into a handful of games back a few years back here with the Islanders in his first stint in the NHL. He's, like I said, been better than Talbot this year, but I don't know. It just seems like a risky contract for me. So let me know what you think down below in the comment section, and we can continue discussing the Koskinen contract. But for me, I think it's a little bit much, a little bit too soon, in my opinion. Now let's jumping over to the NHL Trade Rumours I want to talk about today. It looks as though the Washington Capitals are entertaining a lot of calls and offers for struggling forward Andre Burakovsky. Now, Burakovsky is a forward that we did mention here a while back, but there really hasn't been a whole lot of updates or news on him here recently. But of course, his struggles continue. He's been scratched at times, and apparently there's a bunch of teams that have been inquiring if he's available. As I mentioned previously, and I think the same kind of still stands here, if the Capitals do decide to move Burakovsky, they're going to want another top 9 forward who could play a similar type role in return. They're not really going to be looking for future assets. They want somebody who can play now. Now, of course, the other option too might be that the Capitals likely do want to add some depth on defense, so they could opt to go for a defenseman in return. But more than likely, their asking price will be a similar top 9 forward, preferably somebody who's a little bit on the younger side of things here for sure. Now, there are some teams apparently showing a fair bit of interest in Burakovsky, one being the Oilers, who we just discussed. The other teams reportedly interested are the Colorado Avalanche, the Arizona Coyotes, and the Vancouver Canucks. Now, the Vancouver Canucks have also had forward Nikolai Goldobin, not really playing a whole lot. Goldobin's agent, Igor Larionov, certainly expressed some frustration with his lack of playing time this year. Wouldn't be a shocker to see Goldobin be traded, and certainly he could play a similar type of role, I would think, for Washington that Burakovsky does. So maybe we could see those two teams swap struggling forwards. I'm not sure if it'd be straight up. Vancouver might have to add something to it, but it's certainly a type of deal you could certainly see making sense here for both clubs. Like I said, the other teams have some other forwards in mind as well here that could certainly play a similar type of role. If you look to the Oilers, like Spooner and Rowdy and guys like that, they very well might be looking to move. Another team interested in Burakovsky is the Dallas Stars. Now, they might also be looking at other players besides Burakovsky, as the Dallas Stars and Washington Capitals have been scouting each other quite a bit recently. And, of course, the Dallas Stars do have a few players that they're certainly pretty open to moving to, which we've discussed here before, being forwards Brett Ritchie and Valerie Nichushkin, as well as young defenseman Julius Honka. I do think they would try to package up one or two of those guys. We might see all or at least one or two of them move before the deadline in an effort to improve their club before the NHL playoffs. Adding a guy like Burakovsky, I do think would make a lot of sense for Dallas as well, to try to improve secondary scoring and maybe give him more of a chance to play. Hopefully, maybe a little higher up in the lineup than he was with Washington, and maybe things would work out better for him there. Obviously, Nichushkin is also another player that kind of makes sense that could possibly look at a one-for-one trade. He's still young enough and has had enough promise, but not quite delivered to the skill level that he was expected to since returning from Russia. So we'll see. Maybe those two teams could hook up, and they have been scouting each other a lot, so it may or may not be Burakovsky they're looking at, but it would make sense that they would be. And also with the Capitals maybe looking to add on defense before the playoffs, Honka might be a player that's of interest to them as well. So those two teams also could potentially hook up, along with the other teams I mentioned in regards to Burakovsky here. So we'll see what happens before the NHL trade deadline, but he's certainly a player that seems to be gaining a lot of interest. The other team I want to touch on here is the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, we've previously discussed Derek Brassard and the likelihood of him moving before the deadline and finding a new home, and I do believe that possibility still strongly exists. We've seen comments recently from GM Jim Rutherford kind of downplaying that fact, but at the same time, he's not going to come out and say, yes, we want to trade him, and kind of really discuss that really a whole lot further publicly. But certainly I do feel like there's a pretty good chance that if they can find an upgrade over Brassard or something that I feel would be a better fit for them, then I can see them making that deal. But I could also see them maybe moving a defenseman. They have Justin Schultz, who's getting close to returning. That's going to put a lot of NHL contracted defensemen on their roster, so somebody's got to be moved off. They could send Riikola down to the minors, but even with that, they still have a lot of guys on the roster here. And maybe youngster Tristan Jarry, who's clearly lost out to Casey DeSmith as being, a good solid backup. Now that DeSmith's been signed for 3 years, along with Matt Murray under contract, I do feel that makes a lot of sense that they might decide to move on from Jarry and kind of run with Murray and DeSmith here for, an extended period of time. They have pretty good confidence in both goalies here now moving forward. Looking at the Penguin blue line, obviously you've got Letang, you've got Dumoulin, you've got Mata, Johnson, Pettersson, who's been a real nice fit since coming over from Anaheim. You get Schultz ready to return. Also got Chad Ruhwedel as well. So, Riikola is the main one that could send down to the minors. So, that's a lot of bodies back there that, they're not going to be able to all have ample playing time. At the same time, though, they're not going to want to deplete themselves before the playoffs. So, certainly a possibility that we could see the Penguins possibly move a defenseman, possibly move Jarry, possibly move Brassard in an effort to kind of bulk up here and make their best foot forward for yet another, potential cup run here, while they still have Crosby and Malkin, Kessel, etc. Still got to, nearing the end of their prime. But I know they're going to want to try to win every year as long as these guys are fully capable of doing it. And it's certainly a team that you still need to watch out for. Jim Rutherford's been a pretty aggressive GM over his tenure with the Penguins, and I fully expect him to certainly make some moves to improve that team as much as he can before the playoffs hit. A team that the Penguins could look to for a good trading partner might be the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, this is just me with some ideas here. There's been no link per se that say that they're having discussions, but forwards like Artemi Nisimov has been kind of rumored off and on the trading block here for the last year. Does have a partial no-move clause, so he may have to approve the trade, but for an opportunity to out of Stanley Cup to go to Pittsburgh, I would think he likely would be okay with that. There's also Marcus Kruger, and there's also a familiar face in Pittsburgh, Chris Kunitz, who's on a one-year contract as well with the Chicago Blackhawks. So any of those guys could certainly go to Pittsburgh as a depth piece. Obviously Anisimov can play center, so there would certainly be, an attractive piece there. It might be able to swap with Brassard. That might very well be a situation that they might be able to work out, but Kruger and Kunitz could be depth pieces that the Penguins look to add as well. So there certainly might be, a fit there between the Penguins and the Hawks to hook up for a deal. So if the Penguins do go shopping for what we think they will, that might be a team to keep your eye on. So that is all your news and notes here for today. Of course, as always, I want to hear your comments down below on the latest rumors, as well as the small trade with Vegas and the Mikko Koskinen contract signing with the Edmonton Oilers. Let me know what you think of all this, and we'll continue the conversation down in the comments section. If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you do, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up before you go. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.